Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Goodwin with the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. Welcome to this week's streaming-only History is Lunch program. We are working safely with the skeleton crew from our home, the Craig H. Nielsen Auditorium in the Museum of Mississippi History and Mississippi Civil Rights Museum. I hope that you'll join us next week when Dockery Farms Foundation Executive Director William Lester will present The Delta and Dockery. Today, though, we are delighted to welcome back our longtime friend Wilma Mosley Clopton to present Mississippi Justice Then and Now, which will feature a screening of her new documentary about a 1951 Pike County murder trial. Wilma Mosley Clopton's body of work to date includes 12 short films, 4 books, 1 play, and the Margaret Walker Alexander coloring book for children. She is the recipient of the 2011 Mississippi Humanities Council Educator Award, the 2014 Mississippi Arts Commission Media Fellowship Award, and a multiple-year winner of the Mississippi Film and Video Alliance's Emerging Filmmaker Award. Her work has been recognized by the Margaret Walker Center at Jackson State University, the Mississippi Historical Society, and Women for Progress of Mississippi Incorporated. Dr. Clopton will tell us a little about the film, and after we watch it, we'll hear from Jackson attorney Regina Quinn, a partner in the May Law Firm, and Pauline Rogers, co-founder and president of Reaching and Educating for Community Hope. If you have questions for any one of our speakers, you can ask those in the comments of this live stream, and we'll pass them along at the end of the talk. Now, here's Wilma Mosley Clopton.
Thank you, Chris, for inviting me and for that wonderful introduction. History is Lunch series is always amazing, and they have wonderful people, and I'm just honored to be one of them. As he said, I am Wilma Mosley Clopton. I'm the only daughter of Dr. Jesse Bryant Mosley. As a part of many of her contributions to the state of Mississippi, she authored The Negro in Mississippi History, founder of Smith-Robertson Museum and Cultural Center, and the Negro in Mississippi Historical Society, which was her company in the 1940s. Today, it is known as NMHS Unlimited Film Productions, and it is my honor to serve as one of the filmmakers with this company. Our goal is to save and preserve the history of people of African descent. Like my mother, I strive to carry on a tradition of preserving the history of people of African descent in Mississippi and beyond. One such effort in this tradition is Mississippi Justice. In the fall of 1951, a young Black woman, Hattie Lee Barnes, shot and killed someone who was crawling through her window, her bedroom window, in the middle of the night. He was an uninvited guest. I do not know if history will ever record this as an attempted rape, because the raping of a Black woman by a white male is a rarity, and it is not a rarity, but it is rarely considered newsworthy event because the tradition lingers on from when people of African descent were enslaved in this country. And in some quarters, it is still recognized as a rite of passage. So, as we talk about this, let's see the twists and turns at a time in history when Mississippi justice was indeed Mississippi justice.
My name is Ronald L. Whittington. I prefer the nickname of Ronnie. I live in Pike County, Mississippi, west of Macomb. For the past 37 years, I've practiced law in Macomb. Where we are sitting right now is in the very spot where my great-great-great-grandfather had his home. They were row croppers. And that's how they made a living and supported themselves. I didn't learn this story until Miss Pigott shared it with me just a year or two ago. I visited with Judge Pigott and his wife just to say hello. There may have been a reason for me going by, but I enjoyed being able to drop by and see them. I was leaving that afternoon a couple of years ago, and Miss Pigott came out and said, "Ronnie, I want to send you something that Joe wouldn't approve of me sending you." And I said, "Well, please do." And she said, it's about a case that he handled when he was a young lawyer, and I want to share it with you because he would never do it. What she sent me was the transcript of his argument in support of a motion to dismiss this murder charge against Miss Hattie Lee Barnes in the October term of 1951 Circuit Court in Pike County, Mississippi.
He was a quiet man, and so he never during my childhood described any about that.
A young woman named Miss Hattie Lee Barnes shot and killed a white man. Miss Barnes was a young black woman. She had a 4th grade education. She worked as a waitress in this tavern in the rural part of Pike County in 1951. Kraft was a young man in his early 20s. Reportedly, he'd been to that bar earlier on this particular evening. And he left and returned after hours. Miss Barnes was in the single room that she lived in and stayed there as a night security person. She was in her bed by herself, and she heard gravel shifting in the parking lot of the business, the parking area. She became alarmed by that because the business had been closed and no one else was there. The owner was gone, other customers were gone. And as events unfolded, this man removed the outer screen from the window to her room and raised the window and was crawling across the windowsill when she shot him one time and killed him. Miss Barnes was taken to jail that night. She got out the next day. When she got out, the Pike County Sheriff and the county prosecutor and the DA took her to Walthall County for them to interview her over there to get her to change her story that it wasn't she who shot Mr. Kraft, it was the bar owner, Mr. Rob Lee, who shot Mr. Kraft. After hours of grueling, she did change her story. And then when she got back home the next morning and released again, she said that was a complete lie. Rob Lee didn't do that. I did that. But the powers that be attempted to vindicate Mr. Kraft to being the victim of a black man shooting him and not him approaching a black woman. There was quite a bit of controversy because the victim's family were well-respected, successful people who had their family roots in Walthall County, adjoining Pike County to the east. There was much public unrest. A lot of things were done to camouflage true facts of the case by sheriff, district attorney, county prosecuting attorney, family of the Crafts, sheriff of Walthall County, members of the Board of Supervisors of Walthall County. She was arrested, subsequently indicted for murder. Judge Pigott, as the youngest and newest lawyer in Pike County, was appointed to defend her.
In 1951, he was 26 years old, and he's been given an opportunity to do something It may be the high watermark of their willingness to do it, if it involves challenging whether you call it the status quo, the leadership of the community, the history of the community, or in this case, kind of a racist criminal justice system. In your late 20s, that may be the time when you're going to do it, if you're going to do it at all.
The DA and law enforcement had put on their witnesses, and they had introduced the statement of Miss Barnes, and they rested their case, and Judge Pigott moved to dismiss the indictment without him putting on any evidence in defense. In this case, the facts were established. What Miss Barnes described occurred, and she was defending herself. She didn't murder anyone. She didn't kill anyone in the heat of passion. She defended herself against a man that was breaking into her bedroom, and our common sense doesn't divorce us from understanding what his motive was. In 20 days, she was served an indictment, entered a not guilty plea, and had a trial on the merits on a murder charge. The circuit judge was Judge Tom P. Brady, who went on to be a Supreme Court justice on our Supreme Court. And the courtroom was overflowing, and there was much venom and anger at Miss Barnes and at Judge Pigott for him being the new lawyer defending this black woman who has killed this fine young man born to this fine family who are all pillars of the community. So this is Judge Pigott with the courtroom full. The evidence in this case presented by the state shows that the deceased was killed by gunshot at the hand of the defendant while the deceased was entering the window of the bedroom of the defendant after removing the window screen and raising the lower window. At 12:45 a.m. on Sunday morning, August 23, 1951, the body of this 188-pound, 6 feet 1 inch tall, blonde-haired white man was shot and fell inside the window onto the bed of the defendant. There is no evidence or inference that the deceased had been invited or encouraged to enter the bedroom of the defendant. The bedroom is part of a building housing a rural beer joint in which the defendant was employed as a barmaid and sleep-in guard. As part of her job, she was required to sleep on the single bed and was provided with a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver. The testimony and photographs show the removed window screen, the raised lower window, and the upper torso of the deceased on the bed with his legs on the windowsill. The sheriff testified that he received a telephone call at his home at about 12:45 a.m. from the defendant, and upon arriving at the beer joint, the defendant gave to him the pistol with 1 fired round and 5 loaded rounds remaining in the pistol. She said that she feared for her life as she saw the person entering the bedroom window, and that she shot 1 time at the intruder. The defendant is a black female, 20 years of age, with a 4th grade education. The deceased was a handsome young white man from a prominent family. What his motives were for his actions, I do not know. But without question, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time and had no lawful reason to do what he did. In the famous Mississippi case of Weathersby versus Mississippi, our Supreme Court ruled that where the defendant is the only eyewitness to an offense, the defendant's version must be accepted as true, unless contradicted in material particulars by credible witnesses, physical facts, or facts of common knowledge. This ruling in favor of a white man should be controlling in favor of this black woman. Judge, I realize that you are a popular speaker at meetings of the Citizens Council, expressing expectations that the social circumstances will not change, and sharing hope that members of the white race and the black race can harmoniously live in separate neighborhoods, attend separate schools, and enjoy separate facilities. What you say is well received, and because you are a well-educated, articulate speaker and represent the judicial system, your followers believe in the legality and the constitutionality of their cause. But we both know that the law should be applied equally, and that the rights to enjoy all of the constitutional guarantees belong to all of us equally, regardless of race. Your Honor, this is your moment to decide whether to grow old stooped, trying to stay on the level of people who want you to be one of them, one of the good old boys, or you can stand erect and have them look up to you with respect for having known and followed the high road. I have confidence that you will make the decision that will let you sleep at night and look proudly into the faces of your own grandchildren and know that you have done your duty and kept your oath. They recessed for lunch, and the judge took it under advisement.
In Black Monday especially, you make it very clear that you believe that blacks are ethnically inferior.
I think that the IQ of the Negro race as a whole, while as a controversy as to whether IQ ever changes, nevertheless, I believe that we have far more competent Negroes today who are serving in their states in various and sundry capacities. Now, if we're going to speak anthropologically, I still believe, but I do believe that there are cardinal differences in intellectual potential, just as there are differences in emotional reactions and potentials between all the races. I adopt what Lincoln said. There are marked differences between the races. These are the things that try men's souls. I'm under oath. I'm under oath to abide by the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Mississippi, and I can't help it. When the facts are there and the rule of law is there, I've either got to resign or obey. We either live under law or we live under the whims and caprices of men. And no government has ever endured that lived under the latter. You've got to, if the law is wrong, let's change it. But as long as it's the law, then let's obey it. And that's what the Citizens Council say.
The judge came back in at 1 o'clock. He quieted the courtroom. He had deputies dispatched to all the doors. He locked the doors. And he then made this ruling. Jurors, some decisions that a judge must make are very difficult and require great character and deep soul searching. The loss of this handsome young man was a tragic blow to his fine family. If the circumstances were reversed and a white lady had defended her bedroom against the intrusion of a black man, we would not be here trying her for murder, but would be consoling her for her horrible experience. My oath and our Constitution and laws require that I stop this trial. And release the defendant. Therefore, the motion is sustained. Everyone remains seated while the sheriff removes the defendant from the courtroom, and I ask that her counsel go with her to get for her any possessions she may have left in the jail.
In my view, what happened in Macomb surrounding the Hattie Lee Barnes case and has as much to do with a gutsy young lawyer doing the right thing in the courtroom as it has to do with a gutsy newspaper reporter and publisher who just decided this is a story that needed to be told. The notion of African American people being oppressed is somehow unacceptable to this day to talk in those terms. And in Macomb in 1951 and in 52 and 53, when this Hattie Lee Barnes story continued, they talked in those terms, but it was about her and what was happening to her. It was not about what was happening to the African American community in Macomb, but they were passionate about what was happening to her as an obvious symbol of what could happen to anybody in Pike County who was of African descent.
Good afternoon. Again, I am attorney Regina Quinn, and I just, want to take just a quick moment to just thank Dr. Clopton for this invitation. I certainly appreciate the work that you're doing and the work of your organization. This is just good work, well done, and kudos to you and your organization and your staff, and to the Mississippi Museum of Arts and the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum. Certainly thank you for hosting this event. Now, I will go ahead and do the disclaimers. I am not a criminal defense attorney, nor am I a prosecutor or a judge, but I am an attorney. I practice here in Jackson, and I am actually a corporate lawyer. We do a lot of education law. But I'm also one who believe in human justice and human rights, and that's what I do. I put my hands in the soil with many others, many organizations that do the good work for the people of this state and people of this city. I'm a member of as Dr. Clopton, a member of Women for Progress, and doing outstanding work as well. And many of them, I'm sure, are watching today, as well as the Federation of Democratic Women and the Democratic Party Executive Committee of the Hinds County Executive Committee, as well as the State Executive Committee for the Democratic Party. But I would tell you that for me, and my perspective is that of just someone who's looking at what occurred and what is occurring. I was asked to deal with this from the perspective of the case itself, as well as what's happening here currently. And for me, I see this case as being something that is just very ironic. We know what the facts were in this matter. We have a young black woman, 20 years old, who shot and killed a white man from a prominent family in what many would call certainly Jim Crow era during that time. And that just was the state of the existence for black people in America, and certainly black people in Mississippi. And what we also have is just a brilliant, very aggressive and crafty young attorney, Joe Pigott, who had to plead the case for Ms. Barnes, And all of this happened in 1951. And I did just a little bit of research on the judge and found some things that certainly were disheartening, some of the opinions and as well as some of the articles that were written about him and what his philosophy was in life about African Americans or black people, whatever your choice of description. But he was a part of the Citizens Council. As a matter of fact, he was known to be the philosopher of the White Citizens Council, and that story was written by Time magazine some years ago. So all of this was occurring. So what we have here is a climate in which there were very challenging circumstances for Ms. Barnes and her attorney. But the real irony for me is that Hattie Lee Barnes received more justice in 1951 with these circumstances that many black people are receiving here today and have been receiving for years in this country. We've experienced the situation with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, unfortunately at the hands of police who are sworn to uphold the law, to serve and protect. But we see by video for George Floyd that that is not what happened. What irony is that? That after all of these years, and when you compare these situations, that Hattie Lee Barnes could receive more justice for her circumstance than George Floyd and many others have received in their circumstance. How ironic. And yes, she had the right attorney. I happen to know Brad Pigott. Our law firms are close in proximity, and I have just respected him over the years, and I was just very pleased to see that this was his father who took on this case for Hattie Barnes. And he did an outstanding job. And he filed that motion, and he put his heart into it. And he did something I think was certainly was crafty. He appealed what I believe to be, he appealed to the better angel of Judge Brady. And so he talked about his stance in the community, and regardless of what the circumstances were, that the law had to be applied. And those laws in that day certainly was applied to the benefit of Hattie Barnes. And when he spoke, when Attorney Pigott spoke to the judge, he mentioned a particular case, he referenced this rather, which was Plessy versus Ferguson, that talked about separation, the separate but equal doctrine, meaning black people and white people can be separate, but the treatment and the facilities must be equal. Now we know that separate but equal certainly rarely, if ever, became equal in this country. But there was another case much earlier in the history of America that unfortunately seemed to be the prevailing view of many. And that case has been talked about recently, and that case is the Dred Scott decision. And the circumstance in which we find ourselves currently seems to be that U.S. Supreme Court decision. In that decision, Dred Scott decision, Chief Justice Roger Taney opined that black people are not included and were not intended to be included under the word citizens in the Constitution. Not only did he opine that, but he went further to say, and that black people have no rights that white people are bound to respect. Black people have no rights that white people are bound to respect. What foolishness. What nonsense. But at the time, it was the law. And seemingly, this is the belief of many still today. After this horrendous decision, there was an uproar in America that led to the Civil War 4 years later in 1861. After the Civil War, the Dred Scott rulings were superseded by the amendments to the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, of course, the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, and the 14th Amendment, which was supposed to guarantee equal protection of the laws for all citizens. Now, I believe that we have pretty much come full circle. This country and the world are outraged about what we have seen. The video of the actions taken by the police involving George Floyd. So this country now is doing what is, some would consider, a revolution. It's trying to decide the soul of America. So now the Black Lives Movement has begun. And it is my belief that we have no choice at this point. We must put an end to the foolishness of any remnants of this Dred Scott doctrine. It must be put to rest for good. Interestingly enough, after his decision, Judge Brady went back to what and how people somewhat knew him, and I know he went on to the Supreme Court, but he started to write some things that were very vile regarding black people, the intellect, and many other things, and some of which I just prefer not to express here. But Joe Pigott was relentless, and he was relentless in the pursuit of the truth. And he won that. He pursued it, and many will give him much credit, and I do as well. But I am also reminded of a scripture. It is Proverbs 21:1, and it says, "The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turns it wherever he will." So I believe that through Joe Pigott, that the Lord turned the heart of the judge. And he did that in favor of Hattie Lee Barnes. Now for us, now for America, we need for God to turn more of the hearts of the people of America and of this world. I would tell you that on my way to the office this morning, I saw a white man in Northeast Jackson walking down the street with a Black Lives Matter t-shirt on. So I am encouraged that more people's hearts will be turned by God. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Pauline Rogers. As I've already been introduced, I want to thank Dr. Clopton and the Mississippi History and Archives and the museum for hosting this. My perspective on this film is a little different. I am formerly incarcerated. And so my perspective of what happening in this country and what took place in this film, Mississippi justice then and now. Mississippi justice 1951, Mississippi justice almost 2021. The whole 1951 true story of Mississippi fourth grade educated black woman working two positions, same job, with the job being work and home. I just picture Big Mama, working two jobs, and the position of her work is she working and she living at the same place of where she's working. It's been arranged. And members of the community knew this. Well, one community member made a criminal intended decision to capitalize on this arrangement by coming back at night, scuffling through the gravel, out of hindsight, to this room where this woman was, Big Mama, Grandma, Auntie, Mama, by the name of Hattie Lee Barnes, using forced entry, where he was shot and killed. In a rush to clean up things and the faulty system with the sheriff, the prosecutor, and the DA. Those are three different positions that don't normally work together. But as depicted in the film, this corruption, it is not just depicted in the film, this happened in Pike County, the reality. They wanted to fix things and clean it up, so they took her over to the next county, pressured her into blaming it on the black man. It had to be a black man. Black man did this. Same thing happening in this country now. Are black men innocent in all cases? Absolutely not. But in this case, in April of 1951, it was let's blame black man. Because this upstanding Caucasian citizen cannot be tainted with coming through a window of a black woman who you're not supposed to have dealings with to supposedly rape her. Well, under much pressure, Hattie Lee confessed that she did it. Well, going home, Big Mama taught us to tell the truth. Mama say I always tell the truth. Well, Miss Hattie gets home and she decides after sleeping and waking up the next morning, she wanted to tell the truth. So the next morning she decides to tell the truth. And the truth is what she told. It wasn't the black man in the park. It wasn't the black man who kidnapped my children. It wasn't the black man who did this, but it was actually Mr. Clopton. And so Hattie was fortunate enough to be released, unlike most of the people who's sitting in jail today, because they poor, fourth grade or less educated, can't make bail, no collateral to put up for bail. You got to stay there years later. Some today still even sit in the county jails because they can't make bail. But Miss Hattie was fortunate in 1951. Fast forward into 2020, we still got county jails all over this country, right here in Mississippi, for people who sitting in prison in the county jail because they can't make bail. They don't have no collateral to put up. They don't own no land and no house. And so this was true in 51, and Hattie was fortunate. If she could see what was going on, she could count her blessings. And in Mississippi today, we are number 2 in the world with mass incarceration. We used to be number 3. Just a few months back, we became number 2 in the world with mass incarceration. Over 2 million incarcerated. 41 million under probation and parole. 71 million people with criminal record histories in the country. And Mississippi holds the number 2 position. Now you heard Attorney Quinn talk about the Jim Crow. Well, we in an era that's considered the new Jim Crow. And you can get a book written by Miss Alexander about the new Jim Crow. What do we need to do in a time like this to take us away from 1951? How do we come up to date? We need more judges like we saw depicted in this 1951 film. We need more attorneys like was depicted in the 1951 film. We need more gutsy lawyers, gutsy judges, gutsy DAs, gutsy citizens, not snitches, gutsy citizens, gutsy enough to stop the crime, gutsy enough to video. That's how what's happening now in this country. Somebody was gutsy enough to video what happened to the knee on the neck of George Floyd. It's going to take guts to get us out of here. Guts. What can we do about systemic stuff? We in a crucial season. It's voting time this year. You register, then you participate. Just like we make sure our children get up for Sunday school, some things in our home ought to not be optional. You don't get a vote in the matter, but you do go vote at the polls. That's where we need to push. Right now, and I don't mean to get into this, but we pushing for to change the red, white, and blue. We can change the red, white, and blue, but guess what? You can't change black. I can't wash it off. You can't change white. You can't paint me on. So what do? We change laws. We educate. This backdrop here says straight talk. We get straight talk in the classroom, the church room. We teach it. Day in and day out, teach it. You educate it. You educate voting every day. You don't educate voting when it's time for you to go check the ballot box. You do it every day. That's how you bring Mississippi justice from then to now. Thank you.
I think someone took something. Check your folders.
My bad.
That's okay. Thank you. I really don't think I need to say anything after these two wonderful presenters said what they said, because they did straight talk. But I would be remiss if I didn't say just one thing about the film. Yes, Hattie Lee Barnes was acquitted, but there's a sequel. You see, we don't always have an opportunity to be free. And they definitely did not want Hattie Lee Barnes to get away. Who was she? Who was this woman in 1951 who thought she could be free? So, you remember they wanted this black man? Well, they put out to arrest him, Rob Lee. And because Hattie Lee Barnes knew something about Rob Lee, they hunted her down in Arkansas and brought her back to Mississippi and put her in jail because she was a critical witness and a flight risk. And she stayed there, like we're talking about. She stayed there. But once again, the people did something. She had no money. She could not get herself out. She stayed, as we said, there was no bond, and if there was bond, she couldn't afford it. So the people of the town of Macomb raised the money to get her out of jail. Now, if people in 1951 understand that injustice is injustice and right is right, it's time that we understand it now. That's straight talk again. If you have a chance to buy the book or you're interested in it, please give me a call or email blackhistoryplus@yahoo.com. And if you mention that you saw this program today, you will get a $5 discount on the purchase of a $25 book. So again, you would be able to email blackhistoryplus@yahoo.com. The book is designed to continue the conversation about Mississippi justice and race relations. It's designed for conversations for all grades, all people, to be used anywhere. It also reinforces the fact that we do not have to be afraid to stand up and tell the truth. And that's what we see happening day in and day out on the streets, and that's just what happened in 1951. Mississippi justice, then and now. Well, we have time for questions, because I want to thank you two fabulous ladies for supporting this. I love the opinions that you shared, but now we need to see if anybody has anything to ask of us. So if you would stand for me, and we'll see how that goes.
There are questions from the live stream. Several folks have asked about Ms. Barnes after the trial and whether her family is still in Mississippi.
No, there is no family that we've been able to find to date. And there are several of us working to try and find out where she is. When she moved to Arkansas, I think that was it.
Sarah Kimball asks, how did you make the decision to do a reenactment for the film?
I don't know. Quite frankly, I don't know. It just came as an idea that it would be a docudrama would better portray what was going on, because Judge Pigott, as he later became known, his speech was so forceful that it required some visuals to go with it. And I think that was the impetus for that becoming reenactment. So I have some questions. Ladies, you hinted at it, but they talked about the fact that from the time that she confessed to the time that she was put on trial was 20 days. 20 days. Do you think that's the reality today, or has the system changed, or what do you think? Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll take that. Again, I'm not a criminal defense lawyer, but I would tell you I know plenty of them, and I do know a little bit about the criminal justice system. That is a very unusual occurrence, particularly when you're talking about someone having to defend themselves for a murder trial, for murder. There would need to be discovery. There's an opportunity to make sure that the facts are gathered. But I would tell you what we know from the justice system in this country, and particularly in Mississippi. We have a lot of people that are incarcerated, and they still have been detained for an inordinate amount of time that really contradicts what the law is. That's why we have so many people sitting in jails, not in parchment, because they have not been tried for the case for which they have been charged. So we've got a lot of work to do. A lot of that probably is due to finance of the ability to get through the cases as need be. We do have, for Hinds County anyway, we do have a new DA, Jody Owens, and hopefully some of those problems will start to be diminished, that people are not being detained so long before they have an opportunity to defend themselves. And because as you know, if you haven't had your trial, you have not been found to be guilty of a crime. So you have people in jail waiting for that opportunity, and that is just not the way it should be, and that's we need to correct that in the state. And of course, it was mentioned in terms of bail. You know, there's just this whole cash bond type of issue in this country, particularly in Mississippi. It's where poor people end up in jail because they don't have the financial means for the bail money to get out. Again, good bit of work to do.
Ms. Rogers, did you want to talk about bail?
I concur with what Attorney Quinn has said, that we need bail reform. In this whole country, we need bail reform.
Yes.
However, the plus side, with those that are sitting in the county jail, they are eligible all over this nation to both register and vote. They've not been convicted of crimes, they've only been arrested for alleged crimes. So while they sit in the county jail, they are eligible to register and to vote. And we need those people registered and voting in these ballots. And it takes a coordinated effort with the sheriff, but I concur with what she said.
So since we're talking about bail, I know that people don't fully understand the nature of bail, whether or not it's intended as a punishment. And would you like to share your thoughts on that? Poor people are affected by it. You're isolated, you're pulled away from your family, you don't have the money, so it has all of that. And you got some people that sit in these county jails because they can't bail out, that break under pressure and take plea deals just to get out and go home. And a lot of them that take plea deals, the plea is unrelated to the crime that they were charged for, so they end up going to prison for something that actually wasn't in the intent.
And certainly, bail is not intended to punish. It's just to secure the attendance of the person at their hearing. So oftentimes we hear people being very frustrated when they hear the amount of the bail. And that's not to be confused with what the law requires. And so again, we do need reform in many areas, particularly in the judicial system, and that is one of the areas.
We have a question asking how you came across this story in the first place.
It's interesting how God works, because I certainly had not heard about it, but the gentleman, Robert Whittington, who was my photographer, and he would take all the pictures everywhere. He believed in what we were doing so much that he did not charge me. Well, he ended up telling his brother about the work that I did, and his brother was Robert Whittington. And Robert had wanted me to tell Ronnie Whittington, I'm sorry, and his brother, he wanted to tell me the story. So it took me about 3 years before I could get to tell his story, which is interesting because most people think when they tell me about a story that I'm going to rush right out, I have nothing to do but do it right then. But fortunately for me, Ronnie was patient, and he then shared all of the information with me, all of the documentation. He had the trial transcripts and everything, as well as newspaper clippings, so it was a very wonderful experience, and I'm really honored that and humbled that he thought enough of what we do to ask us to tell the story.
Alyssa Williams says, thank you for providing the great material for this important discussion. Will the film be distributed beyond Mississippi?
That's a good question. We are working on it, as we have connections now that we will submit them to, so yes, we're certainly looking forward to that. I have requests for the film at least as far as North Carolina, so I know that it'll be out there.
We have at least one viewer from North Carolina on the live stream, I know. We have a question, this may be from Ms. Quinn. Does law enforcement cooperate with voter registration efforts for those detained and not convicted?
Well, that's what was just being mentioned earlier, is that there needs to be more coordination with that. I think it would probably very much depend on what county you're in, what sheriff you're dealing with. But excuse me, I would tell you that being a part of some organizations, we are going to be very interested and intentional now in our efforts to see about getting some cooperation and coordination with sheriffs in various parts of the state. And all that we can do, we will do. So hopefully we will have the cooperation.
We have this question. Do you think that it may be the overpopulation of jails and crimes that slow the court system which creates the cycle? And what would be your thoughts, since it all differs from then and now in reforming?
Well, again, in terms of some of the crimes that people are being charged with, I think that from what I'm hearing anyway from some of these attorneys is that a lot of this is dealing with substance abuse. People would be better served with treatment, and instead of being given time to sit in jail, because certainly it impacts our community at large. But I would tell you, quite frankly, the other thing is just opportunity. We've got to expand the opportunities for all citizens of this state and this country. We live in a state where the budget for Mississippi is, a couple of $1 billion, but only less than 1% of those funds, those monies, that $1 billion or so plus, go to black businesses. And we are 38%, 35% of the population. So when you have such a lopsided effect of the largesse for this state, and the educational system, certainly we're making some headway, but we need some real work done. We need everyone to put their hands in the soil, so to speak. There are three major indicators that tell the quality of life for people, and that is their educational system. We know we have been on the very bottom. We're starting to turn the tide there. We may be about 46 or 47 now and not 50. It is the health issues and health and wellness, and we know we have the disparity in health with the African American community. And the economy, the economic indicators, we make much less money than our counterparts. So when you put all that together, what happens? And we see what happens with this now, coronavirus. These things are really being brought to bear. It's resurfacing, and we're feeling the effects of it more so than our white brothers and sisters. So we've got to do the work.
So do you have maybe one more question?
Yeah, one more here. It says, Brad Pigott made the point in the film that individuals acted in ways that supported injustice, or supported justice in this case. What is the limitation of depending on good individuals, i.e. having good media, good attorney, et cetera?
I'm not quite...
I
Did you understand that?
The limitations of having to rely on
other people?
Single actors instead of a system, yeah.
I see the limitation being that that you have to rely on that. You know, because if the people who are in church every Sunday really believed what they are saying on Sundays, then we wouldn't be having this happening in the streets. So therefore, we're relying on a process over which we have no control. To change that process, we need to have the system change so that we have engagement of all. I know there are more questions out there, but I think I have to wrap this up. I want to thank everybody for being here and for asking questions, and I'd like to thank the Mississippi Humanities Council, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, the Medgar and Murley Evers Institute, Women for Progress, the two museums, and That's So Cute, for their support of Mississippi Justice then and now. Mississippi Justice celebrates a time when a town said enough is enough, based on the strength of one woman and a blatant miscarriage of justice. Mississippi Justice is not designed to erase the horror for which Mississippi is well known, but rather to show that in the worst of times, people do not have to be cowards, and that strength, bravery, and goodness can prevail. This then would be true Mississippi Justice. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for being with us today. Thank you all for watching from home. Ms. Quinn, Ms. Rogers, Dr. Clopton, we appreciate everything. The video is available for folks to watch anytime on the department's Facebook page, and we'll upload it to the department's YouTube channel this afternoon. We had folks watching from not just across the state, but folks mentioned from Alabama, Kansas, North Carolina, Rhode Island, so a nice reach for the message. Thank you all. I hope that we see you next week when Bill Lester is talking about Dockery and the Delta. Thank you to our panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.